My name is Joe Bruno. I am the former market leader, senior vice president for Wells Fargo Advisors and Wells Fargo in the Jacksonville, Florida market. Since the publication of the New York Times article regarding fake interviews at Wells Fargo, the feedback of support we've received for coming forward and telling the truth about the hiring practices at Wells Fargo has been tremendous. As a result of the article, others have come forward with similar experiences, and they now feel empowered to say something and be part of a positive movement for change, not only at Wells Fargo, but within the financial industry. The focus of this video is Wells Fargo and their DEI program and fake interviews. How their past and current corporate culture has not been able to embrace the changes necessary for results-driven DEI initiatives, instead of just activity-driven initiatives. The right activity is important and a first step in any results-driven organization, for it is the fuel that propels future results. A focus with specific and measurable activity is necessary in order to achieve real results. Adding fake interviews to the mix harms the very people that the DEI program is trying to assist. It's the wrong activity that inflates DEI metrics for affirmative action reports, regulatory briefings, and annual reports. For the last 5 years, Wells Fargo has mandated, per HR and senior leadership, and subsequently lowered the mandate to a best practice status for their DEI interview initiative. The requirement to add at least one diverse candidate to a pool of at least 4 candidates for every job posted at the firm. The preference is Black African Americans and women. What is a fake interview? Simply put, a candidate has been identified for an open position and a determination has already been made by the hiring manager for the candidate that will receive the job. To clarify, a fake interview is not the same as having a lead candidate that a manager may have in the pool, or a candidate that has been groomed for a role and is now in a position to interview for that position that is currently open. Both of these candidates may have an edge, but they still have to interview against other qualified candidates and be chosen. Wells Fargo has taken fake interviews to a new level. HR requires interviews, no exceptions allowed, and as a best practice, throw in some Black and brown people and a woman into the pool so Wells Fargo can show activity towards their diversity goals. It's important to understand that most people at Wells Fargo are good, well-intentioned people. In other words, they want to do the right thing. Policy is driven from the top. Leadership sets policy and then mandates those policies to be driven with actionable activity at lower levels. It all works great when the policies are credible and the leaders are people driven by an ethical and moral compass. The compass at Wells Fargo is broken. What is Wells Fargo trying to accomplish in their effort to drive diversity, more specifically DEI? They want to show the public that they care about diversity and over time will change the complexion of their workforce to be more representative of society at large. Key word is over time. DEI at Wells Fargo is a long-term strategic initiative. As Wells Fargo would say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. In other words, the initiative is not a project, a problem that is identified, and a game plan is put together to tackle it and resolve it within a short period of time. DEI at Wells Fargo is not a sprint, something to be resolved now. There is no sense of urgency. That is the problem. The diversity initiative has been identified and classified as a marathon, not a sprint. People suffer while we wait for Wells Fargo to take DEI seriously. Slavery was identified as a marathon. It took 250 years to eradicate it. Jim Crow segregation was identified as a marathon. It took nearly 100 years to eradicate it. Now DEI is identified as a marathon at Wells Fargo. How many years and generations need to pass before we see results? If the past is any indication, it will take decades. In the meantime, Black and brown people, women, Hispanics, Asians, LGBTQ, and others will have to wait their turn. Be patient. Diversity in the workplace is touted as a strategic initiative. It will happen, we promise, but it takes time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Kicking the can down the road is not a plan. It's not hard to find and hire qualified, diverse people. Wells Fargo has classified DEI as a marathon. Tell that to the disenfranchised, marginalized people that it's a marathon. We don't want to offend. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. Whose feelings? Which people? White people? Why is leadership worried about hurting people's feelings if they move too fast? Wells Fargo's position, most of the wealth right now is in white hands, and white people prefer to work with other white people in helping to manage their wealth. If we change the complexion of our workforce too much, too fast, it has the potential to drive that wealth away from us and to other firms that cater to white people. It's that simple, based on ROI, return on investment. That is what leadership thinks. Throw in some personal racism, implicit or explicit, and you have a formula for the status quo. Wells Fargo sees the trend. The demographics are changing, but Wells Fargo doesn't want to be early to the curve. It's 10 plus years out until we really need to change gears. In the meantime, short-term quarterly profits are the focus, and DEI is not the sprint we want to be in. Wells Fargo is okay with the casualties the current strategic DEI strategy will achieve to disenfranchise and marginalize people. Running the strategy as a marathon achieves their activities-driven goals. Why is there a wealth gap, an income gap, a housing gap, an education gap, a health gap? Why all these gaps? Simply put, access to the playing field is limited. Black and brown people and women have been held back throughout the history of the United States. It's the truth, and we need to talk about it. As great as the U.S. is, think how much greater it would be if it didn't hold back people because they don't look like the majority. The starting line for everyone is not the same. That's a fact. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 may have made things more equal, but equity is a major laggard. When you interview for a job and the interviews are fake, you are not stepping up to the actual starting line. You are 5 or 10 or 20 yards behind the line. You are handicapped before you ever start, all because of the color of your skin or your gender preference. That is not right and not fair. When you see it happening, you need to call it out, regardless of the consequences and costs. 2 plus 2 equals 4, not 3, as some will have you believe. Zero tolerance for injustice and racism. To uncover fake interviews is actually easy. Just ask the 110 market leaders around the country. I was a former market leader. Ask the managers that report to them. Ask the HR recruiters that tell the managers that you have to conduct these interviews, even though you have clearly explained that a candidate has already been sourced and selected. Ask the divisional presidents and their divisional teams about fake interviews. It's an open secret at Wells Fargo, and it has gone on for years. I will give you 3 recent examples of fake interviews. Then I will give an actionable solution that will provide real results around DEI hiring. Wells Fargo has denied these fake interviews exist. They have also shut down the model and infrastructure we put in place for hiring diverse candidates. 2 plus 2 equals 3. It does not. No matter how often someone says it does not. An example, in 2021, 2 top WFA million-dollar teams at Wells Fargo needed to add a financial consultant to their respective teams. Someone that they have already pre-screened and chosen, and they are paying for, not the firm. No need to conduct interviews here. A candidate has been identified and paid for by the wealth management team that is adding to their team. The first team is adding the position of a financial consultant. An informal interview has been conducted and a decision to hire has been determined. The other team is not adding a new member, but just restructuring the team to change one member from a financial advisor status to a financial consultant status for purposes of compensation. In both instances, HR at Wells Fargo, backed up by senior leadership, requires that interviews be conducted. And as a best practice, one candidate needs to be diverse, preferably black or a woman. If these interviews are not conducted, the hiring manager cannot move forward with the hiring restructuring. No exceptions. They must be done by the manager. Otherwise, the manager is not doing their job and can be removed from his or her position. Under threat of removal, a manager is compelled to comply. The above examples are real. They happened and are happening around the country. The interviews took place. The interview guides were falsified to make it look like the chosen candidate did better. A numerical value of 1 to 5 is given to each candidate. The one that has been chosen receives a 4 or a 5. Everyone else receives a lower number, regardless if they did better or not. The candidates that receive this fabricated number now have a permanent record at the firm that they failed at this interview. The qualitative part of the interview guide has language that states the candidate did not do as well as the chosen candidate. When a black African American candidate or a woman candidate is subject to these fake interviews and interview guides are falsified to make them look worse on paper than the chosen candidate, this is clearly, morally, and ethically wrong, and I would argue legally wrong also, for their civil rights are being broken based on the color of their skin or gender. When they come back to interview for another job at Wells Fargo, there is a track record of failed attempts, and this is driven by HR and senior leadership by requiring this best practice be enacted. The new hiring manager knows this information and has access to view these guides or talk to the HR recruiter who will communicate how they did on these past interviews. Is that fair? Is the starting line the same for these black and women candidates? Or are they starting behind the start-finish line the next time they interview and are used yet again to fill an interview pool for the purpose of showing diversity and activity at the firm? This is the exact definition of being disenfranchised and marginalized, not only by society, but by a firm, in this case, Wells Fargo. Even though clearly an exception to not interview should have been granted, Wells Fargo requires the fake interviews to go forward. If an investigator were to pull all the FC's hires from around the country over the last 5 years, how many of them would be fake? How many of them had diversity candidates in the pool that were interviewed and had a 0 chance to receive the job? The investigator would need to ask the hiring manager if he or she had a predetermined candidate for this FC role. Ask the FA that brought the candidate to the manager if he or she had any intentions of hiring anyone else but the candidate they brought to the manager. Ask the manager and the FA if they have complained to HR or to their immediate manager about doing these fake interviews. And lastly, ask the hiring manager if he or she had no choice but to do these interviews, if they wanted to onboard the candidate for the job. The problem is systemic at Wells Fargo. It can easily be identified and proven. Others and I have complained for years to HR, to our immediate managers, and to senior leadership. Nothing has been done. And it's not just the FC position, it's the FAIT position, which is a trainee position for a financial advisor, the CA position, the client associate position, and the local branch manager position. And yes, even the market leader position, the role that I was in, and the divisional leader position. Does 2 plus 2 equal 3? Another example, in South Florida, two large markets are brought together, the Fort Lauderdale market and the Miami market. The combination of combining these two markets is the creation of a mega market, the biggest in the industry. The market leader job is posted for anyone to apply, and of course, the two lead candidates, the current market leaders in Fort Lauderdale and Miami, are going to interview for the job and have an edge. Both our premier managers have successfully driven recruiting, driven revenue, and driven retention for the last 10 plus years. They have the experience and the expertise and the results to be seriously considered for this important mega market. One of these two candidates is Hispanic. He has been a top and consistent performer and top recruiter for Wells Fargo for 10 plus years, been at the firm for 20 plus years. Fake interviews are conducted for this role. A predetermined candidate from home office with no branch manager experience, no complex manager experience, no market experience, and no recruiting experience interviews for the job. A white male from corporate who would like to move to Florida with his family, who is well connected to the leadership chain at Wells Fargo, he gets the job. Wells Fargo has a history of acting with impunity. We will hire whomever we want, whenever we want, fake interviews at its best, even if it means we let a qualified and experienced premier manager that is Hispanic leave the firm as a result. And he did leave the firm. As a side note, the white male that received the market leader job in this fake interview quit after 2 weeks on the job and went back to his old corporate job. He personally texted me when he got the role originally and said that he was going to have to rely on me to show him the ropes on recruiting. I have the text. He was over his head. He needed to perform in the field and recruit million-dollar producers from other firms, which he has never done before. A requirement not just to get this job, but a level below this job. In other words, he leapfrogged over others twice over at the expense of a more qualified and diverse Hispanic candidate with a proven track record. A text was sent to the hiring manager of the fake interview, calling him out in this inappropriate hire. The ethical and morally bankrupt act stood with impunity. How does this happen? It's Wells Fargo. 2 plus 2 equals 3. Two more examples in 2021. Wells Fargo and Wells Fargo Advisors, their wealth management arm, were coming together and consolidating regions and divisions. As a result, regions were going away and being replaced by divisions, larger in size. Fake interviews were conducted for some of these new divisional positions. One was for the Southeast Division. That was the division that I was in. The new divisional president job went to, in my opinion, a known bully at the firm, a person that had a track record of creating a hostile work environment, in my opinion, for the people that reported to him. When he got the role, everyone knew a fake interview had taken place, but no one dare say anything. It was just the way things happen around Wells Fargo. How could someone with his reputation be promoted to a divisional president leadership role? Unless, of course, he had friends in high places, which he had. Friends that would make the final decision, which they did. The person that didn't get the position has an exceptional performance track record and a reputation for a healthy and inclusive work environment. That person is a woman and also is a lesbian and has been with the firm for 20 plus years. On paper, she had the inside track for the divisional president role. Instead, the role was given to a white male, in my opinion, with a record of being a bully and creating a hostile work environment. How can this happen? And why are we not outraged? Fake interviews are conducted on a regular basis. A predetermined candidate is chosen. A diversity candidate, in this case a woman, is used in the pool to inflate the diversity activity numbers. 2 plus 2 equals 3. Diversity is a marathon, not a sprint, is what Wells Fargo will tell you. The reason it's a marathon is because they will hire diversity on their own timeline. The CEO of Wells Fargo made a comment back in 2020. He publicly stated that the reason Wells Fargo does not have many black African Americans in leadership roles at the firm is because there aren't many qualified black African Americans in the industry to choose from. Blaming the fish if you can't fish. Interesting. Within 24 hours after the comment and the outrage that ensued, the CEO apologized. He admitted to having an implicit, unconscious bias towards black people. He is sorry, is what he said, and will work harder to do better. Do you think the Wells Fargo board of directors, when they went searching for a new CEO, asked the question during the interview, tell us about what you will do to attract and hire more diversity to the firm? How will you attract more blacks, more Hispanics, more women to the firm? Was the question ever asked by the board? Did the CEO respond in a similar fashion? The CEO of Wells Fargo doesn't feel there are enough qualified black African Americans in the industry for him to recruit to Wells Fargo in leadership roles. He told us that. Believe him when he tells you something. Has he checked with the competition? Merrill Lynch, UBS, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Raymond James, and numerous other firms. They are out there, just like he was out there. A white, privileged CEO that an executive search firm came calling for. At the direction of Wells Fargo Board of Directors, Wells Fargo found its leader and paid him nearly $25 million in 2021. Why can't the CEO of Wells Fargo find qualified black African Americans for leadership roles? Is that a fair question? Where is he casting his fishing line? Maybe he should use the same executive search firm that Wells Fargo used to find him. Okay, so the CEO can't recruit black African Americans. Can he retain talent? A black African American leader, second in charge at Wells Fargo's independent brokerage channel, left the firm to join the competition. How does this happen? Apparently, the competition knows how to recruit black talent. You have a top black African American with a PhD in economics, a proven successful track record for many years, well-liked by everyone, and you can't figure out a way to retain him. Can't find another bigger leadership role within the firm. Counter with a higher compensation package to keep the executive. Do they let white executives go to the competition as easily? Or do they make them an offer that is lucrative enough to keep those white executives? Double standard? When it comes to retention of black people, the track record is as bad as recruiting black people. A solution and model for diversity. We have a solution for the DEI program at Wells Fargo. We were building the infrastructure to hire more black African Americans, more Hispanics, more women, more LGBTQ, more Asians, more diversity in the greater Jacksonville market. It was a model for the rest of the firm. It was discussed on a national call as we were invited to discuss the new model to our peers from around the country. A new creative model to drive diversity. The invitation to discuss this model came from a black African American leader at the firm in charge of diverse networks at Wells Fargo. Not long after placing me on the national call to discuss the new model, this black leader was demoted. to a lesser role. A new leader from a different firm that the CEO was originally from was brought in. A move to put in place your own people that will drive your initiative on your timeline with little to any pushback. Call it out when you see it, even if it costs you your job. I'm going to end with this. Let's discuss the solution to drive real results for DEI programs at Wells Fargo and other firms that are serious about DEI. First, don't call it a strategic initiative. That is code that it will take at least 5 years to see any meaningful results and that it won't get fully accomplished for at least 10 years. Never call diversity hiring a marathon. Slavery and segregation, those were marathons. Second, call it a project. It's a sprint. It's not a marathon. Just like oxygen, you need it now. It's not a little at a time as needed. Put a sense of urgency on the project. Place a timeline on it. And third, measure it. What you measure, you achieve. The model our team was implementing in the greater Jacksonville market, a best practice to always have a 50-50 pool of diverse to non-diverse candidates for every position that becomes available in the market. If you can't find 50% diverse, tell me why. Where are you looking? Who are you networking with? Do you know how to fish? Statistically, if you do this for 18 to 24 months, you will see meaningful results in your diversity hiring. If you don't see results, the numbers will tell you why. Is your activity the right activity that will produce results? If not, change the activity. Measure everything you do. Clearly spell out your goals. The 50-50 pool is a vehicle that will help us get there. In addition to the best practice 50-50 candidate pool, every interview panel must be diverse. The panel conducting the interviews needs to be 50% diverse. People of diverse backgrounds bring a different perspective to the table than non-diverse people. Different life experiences, educational experiences. Different is good. It provokes critical thinking and better decisions. It levels the playing field. Results are driven by the right activities, not just activities. Network and build relationships with the various diverse groups. Black African Americans, women, Hispanics, Asians, LGBT, and other groups that have been historically marginalized. Network inside the firm and externally. Some examples of external partners: the Urban League, the NAACP, HBCUs. Partner with these external organizations and internal groups to let their members know when new positions are posted, to encourage the various groups to interview for their jobs. Network and build relationships. Conduct virtual Zoom-type meetings with different diverse networks. Explain the various positions available in your market. Have a representative for each position talk about a day in the life of that position, how to properly prepare for various roles, and build a career with the firm. Reach out to diverse networks and encourage them to join these virtual meetings. Our team was doing all of this before the infrastructure was dismantled by Wells Fargo. Mentorship. In our Jacksonville market, we began a program to personally mentor Black African Americans, Hispanics, women, and Asians for future leadership roles at the firm. Build the bench for future leaders. Get people ready for leadership roles by preparing ahead of time. Once the job is posted, do they have the skill set required for the position? Were you aware of the skill set needed in order to prepare properly? That's the value of a mentor. He or she has been there and can guide you through the maze. Our team did this. 2 + 2 always equals 4. Fake interviews have no place in corporations. Adding diverse candidates to these fake interviews further marginalizes black and brown people and women in society. Zero tolerance for this nonsense is a requirement. We don't want long-term strategic DEI programs. Hiring qualified black and brown people and women candidates is not hard. Like oxygen, we need it. We need it now. Breathe in and out. It's that simple. What can you do right now? If you feel you were part of a fake interview, if you are a manager and have been involved in a fake interview, or a candidate and have been involved in fake interviews, contact the Justice Department, the Civil Rights Division. Contact your state's Attorney General's office. Contact the Department of Labor. Contact the Senate Banking Committee and the House Financial Services Committee. Also contact the CEO at Wells Fargo. Let them all know your story. What you say matters. Don't give up. And don't let fake interviews define you. Let your voice be heard, for change comes from pushing back on hatred and racism. Complacency is not a plan. Activism, doing something about it. Let that be your legacy for positive change. My name is Joe Bruno, and thank you for listening. Please share this video with others.